welcome to The Pulse. I'm your host, Natasha McKenty, and I am so excited to introduce today's guest. She's the executive director of the Coalition of Muslim Women of KW, a federally registered not-for-profit organization whose mandate is to empower Muslim women and girls to be leaders and change makers. They offer leadership and skills development for Muslim women while addressing racism, discrimination, and Islamophobia through advocacy, activism, and bridge building. Fauzia Mazhar works tirelessly towards building a society where Muslim women are valued, engaged, empowered, and recognized as leaders.
So Natasha, our organization, Coalition of Muslim Women of KW, started 10 years ago in 2010 in Kitchener-Waterloo. However, it was a response to Bill 94 in Quebec at the time, which was sometimes what we call the grandfather of what they have now as the secularism law, which effectively impact Muslim women's clothing choices and kind of penalize them if they want to wear the choice of the clothing that they want to wear especially in labor market, but also in social situations. So at the time that we started, it was something very new in Canada, and we were far away from Quebec. I mean, maybe not that far away, but still it was in Quebec. However, in general, the environment in the rest of Canada was also not very, it was quite toxic. There was a lot of support for the bill throughout Canada at that time. One survey put it at 75% of Canadians would agree to have some kind of restrictions on Muslim women's clothing. Believe it or not, it was it was 95% in Quebec. So of course, being Canadian, being Muslim, and being women, all three are important part of my identity and a lot of other women's identity who got together in Kitchener-Waterloo and thought that we need to do something about this now, and we need to make sure that the place that we call home is welcoming and is safe and is a place where our daughters and our granddaughters can thrive. So it was a very small initiative. A few women came together, some men joined later, and we started a very grassroots group. We offered a press conference and a community forum called Let Us Talk, and this is how the journey started.
Do you feel that a significant amount of change has been made for Muslim women in Canada?
That's a very interesting question. One thing that we have to keep in mind that Muslim community in general and Muslim women in particular are probably the only minority group right now, even in Canada, where the state has come out and enacted laws based on what we call legal discrimination or de jure discrimination. So many people, like many Canadians, won't know about those laws. Sometimes they came in they came as anti-terror laws, or if you remember, in just before the 2015 elections, the federal government was in the court against one Muslim woman and not allowing them to take her the citizenship oath with a niqab or a face covering on her face, trying to restrict the voting rights for women who cover their faces. So yes, that I would say that the change has happened, especially you can say that now when the secularism bill was presented in Quebec, in the rest of the Canada, the favor for that bill is not that high as at all. It was I don't remember, it was I think at 40% or so, which is quite significantly low than 75% 10 years ago. However, there's a lot of worry and concern in as a Canadian Muslim woman that I have, and I hear from others as well, that this can change anytime. So in Quebec, it has taken 10 years to perfect a bill to become a law and stand a couple of charter challenges as well. So once it's perfected, then it's only sometimes a change of government away, a change of political ideology, away, then these things can come back. So I feel that we have made a lot of gains, but I also worry about how stable these changes are, how fragile these changes are.
Tell me what Islamophobia is.
So the book definition of Islamophobia is like um, prejudice against Islam and Muslims that actually shows in action. So basically, Islamophobia doesn't mean that you have to like Muslims and Islam. Islamophobia doesn't mean that you can't have prejudice. There's no way that prejudices can be tried or penalized or anything like that. It's when it turns into action. It's called Islamophobia. It's not about ideology. It's about tangible actions that actually harm people who identify as Muslims in Canada. We're not talking about the whole world. Right now, we're talking about Canada, and also people who can be perceived as Muslims.
Your organization has worked on a couple of projects to create positive change in the community and beyond for Muslim women. I'd like to talk about those three programs. You have the Brave Space program, Counter Speech Lab program, and correct me if I don't say this properly, Sula Project. Is that right?
Wow, you did great.
Did I? Oh, good.
For sure.
Good. So tell me about those projects and what they mean to you and how they've kind of evolved.
So Natasha, all of these projects that you mentioned or programs that you mentioned are part of our bigger Islamophobia, a response to Islamophobia program. It's the core thing that we do. And you might wonder, and others as well, that what does this Muslim Women's Organization have to do with Islamophobia? So Muslim women are there is a lot of evidence coming from Europe as well as coming from US, actually less from US and more from Canada, that Muslim women are disproportionately targeted by Islamophobic acts of violence. So those acts of violence can be like every day, where there is verbal harassment, there is harassment on the street, there is harassment on public transit. Hijab pulling is very, very, it's a lot more common than you think. Like I know people in Kitchener-Waterloo, more than one, more than two, more than 10, more than 15 who had their hijab pulled in Kitchener-Waterloo, right? So lots of these things, and if you look at the organization and the women involved with the organization, all of us can count not one, quite a few incidents where we were personally targeted by either acts of violence, from verbal harassment to physical or close to physical assaults. They might not have been crime, but they were enough to feel us that we were physically assaulted. And then on the other hand, if you look at all of the systemic challenges or the discrimination in employment, so we all have experienced it personally. So this is why we're so passionate about ensuring that we can be part of the solution and really try to help this problem. Now, people might ask, Islamophobia, why are we worried about one religion? Because a lot of time we don't understand that Islamophobia is actually anti-Muslim discrimination, which is happening at the intersection of race, racial identity, xenophobia, and religious identity, and bring gender as the fourth dimension. As I said before, because Muslim women are, especially those who are visible, are definitely even in a statistic, Canada's report, are disproportionately targeted by Islamophobic acts of violence. So we have a very comprehensive program to address Islamophobia in Waterloo region. We're a local organization and very proud on our local roots. We don't aspire to become national. We love being local. So our program actually desires to address the problem at individual or personal level, institutional and systemic level, and social and societal level. So we continue to create programs where we can eradicate this ill from the society on all of those levels. So the three programs that you mentioned, SULA, is something which is really targeted to the individual level, where when there is a victim of a hate incident or a hate crime, and instead of trying to go through the traditional justice system, we thought that if we can offer a more of a healing experience for both the victim and also the harm doer, it will create more harmony in the future, instead of more harmony and more resolution, instead of penalizing the harm doer and never creating that opportunity, never being able to create that opportunity where the harm doer and the person who was harmed in that situation can come together and can understand each other. So Sula is actually, that project where we have access to mediation through our partnership with Community Justice Initiative for victims of hate incidents, hate crime. This is open to all. It's not just restricted to Muslim women. Any victims of hate crime or hate incidents in Waterloo region can reach out to us or can reach out to Community Justice Initiative, and we will be very, very happy to help in that situation. Now, the two other programs that you mentioned, they haven't formally started yet, especially for one. We're hoping that we can get a grant that we have put together with Heartbeats Hate. And we're hoping that we are able to offer this very innovative first-time counter-speech lab program in Canada. I haven't seen anything like that happening in Canada. So basically, if you remember that we are trying to really address this problem at all levels. So what Counter Speech Lab will do is that it will prepare, especially youth and women, but people who are interested in tackling online hate, to actually produce counter speech, which can fill the ether space, which can fill the online space. So right now what happens is when there is hate speech on the social media especially, it's not easy to take it down. It's very, very difficult. And if people answer, a lot of time it becomes a mess, and there is hardly any if you're a third party, you're a third person, and you're looking at that comment section and looking at that Twitter feed or something, you will just leave I don't know what, thinking what. So this counter speech idea is that yes, there can be hate speech online, which we don't want to, but if it cannot go away, at least we can try to provide this counter speech on those platforms as well. That can be a good alternative. A lot of time it's easier to talk to people who are already on your side of the fence. How do you get in touch with people who are on the other side of the fence? For that, you have to create other kinds of opportunities. Also, there are people who have who understand the language of heart, and there are people who understand more the language of head. So we have to make sure that we're reaching out to all people. Come in and you can talk about topics like, okay, I think Muslim women are oppressed. Perfect. We're not going to be offended by this. I think you are too hot in this scarf. That's completely fine, right? Let's come and talk about these things that you may have a lot of questions about, but you may not either have courage to ask these questions, or you're too worried that you're going to be offending someone, and these things always stay. And why this is important for us to happen is that if we exclusively use the language of heart only, then people always have deep down doubts and deep down questions that are never answered, right? And values are never challenged or questioned. It's just like heart. Okay, I love my neighbor, I love you. But I have questions, I really want questions. So the idea of Brave Space is to provide that space. And again, we're putting ourselves at risk, Muslim women, and we're thinking that this will help with our work and will bring long-term social and societal change.
What would you say my action should be? We say stand up, speak out, push back. Sometimes that's scary, right? Is the best action that someone can take is to educate themselves, or is it to speak out, or do something that makes them feel a little fearful? on behalf of someone else? And have you ever had that happen in your life where, you know, you were being mistreated in public and somebody stood up on your behalf? How can we become braver? How can we learn to speak up and educate ourselves and, you know, show more empathy towards someone that maybe we haven't experienced what they've gone through in life? How do we do that? What is the first step, do you think?
So 20 years ago at my first workplace, I think I was there for about 3 months, and I was the only non-white, woman in that workplace. And there was a client who came in, and he was not very happy because of other things probably in his life, but he demanded that he wants to speak with someone who is Canadian. He wants to speak with someone who speaks Canadian when I tried to serve him. And I was just a year in Canada, and I was kind of frozen. And my boss, he just kind of appeared from nowhere, and in the background, and he said, "And Fauzia speaks perfect Canadian." So that kind of helped in that moment. It was like lighthearted, and it didn't make it of a huge deal or anything like that. It's like, okay, sure, you're asking for someone who speaks Canadian, and here is someone who speaks perfect Canadian. So that kind of really helped. Now, there is not a one solution that's going to work for everyone. We have to understand that we all are very diverse in terms of our own preferences in life, our own attitudes, our own aptitudes, everything, right? So for someone, it might be easy to just stand up and say something. For the other person, it might be easier to actually provide some comfort and comfort to the victim, right? Someone might be intrigued and they want to go and learn more about the topic afterwards. I would say everything is legitimate. Everything is legitimate. One thing that I want everyone to not do is do not turn, like, any public opportunity like this, do not turn into like an ugly match of words where you're shooting the person or the messenger of the message. Instead, try to engage them. It's very important. It's easy to get into this war of words, but in the end, we lose the opportunity, because we can have confidence that there's no shortage, especially with Heartbeats Hate, that this message of heart, where we're showing kindness just because we're human to each other. It's not about our differences. It's not even about rights. It's not even about, anything. It's just about being human. It brings us back to our basic humanity and says, hey, we can just live with each other, right? Just appreciate each other as fellow human beings. So it's really, really very nice, and it's really inspiring to see people who are involved with Heartbeats Hate, right? And I think for a complex problem like addressing racism or Islamophobia or anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Black racism, homophobia, anything you talk about, one solution is never going to be the answer. You really want to be able to address the problem from so many different angles, right? Like Rosa Parks happened because there were a lot of civil society groups and a lot of individuals and organizations working for that moment, where one woman, could have the courage to say no. And her no actually, initiated a response that was not possible before, right? So we all have to work together, and hopefully that moment will come soon where we will have our own Rosa Parks moment, and we will be able to see the change together. And I think it's happening in some ways, like I've especially seen with the BLM movement and indigenous racism movement, that there is a lot more at least a lot more open ears and a lot more a different tone and a lot more support than you could have ever imagined just a year ago, just even 1 year ago. So that's quite a nice thing for someone like me to see, who has worked in this kind of area for such a long time, where I always thought that I'm only sowing seeds and I may never see the change in my life. Only my children will probably see the light. So it's very nice to see, that wind, just kind of experience the change of wind, that maybe it's changing.